Hello everyone, I am fantasy author Dianna Gunn, and today I want to talk about something that I know everyone struggles with, but that is a particularly big problem for writers, and that is something I like to call comparisonitis, or the comparison trap. When you hear that Stephen King writes 2,000 words a day, do you feel like less of a writer because you don't also write 2,000 words a day? When you see authors publishing 3 books at a time, or publishing 6 or 12 books a year, do you feel bad because you can only publish 1 book a year, or maybe not even that much? When you see someone your age achieving great success in their chosen field, do you immediately start comparing your own life to theirs, looking at all the ways that you fall short? If you answered yes to any of the questions I just asked, that means that you're suffering from comparisonitis. But what is comparisonitis, you ask? It's the tendency to make yourself feel like complete and utter crap by comparing yourself to other, happier, wealthier, more successful, or more in love people. I used to do this all the time, specifically with the last one I mentioned. I would see people my age getting books published or achieving amazing things in other fields, pushing science forward, doing great things for diversity in education or publishing or whatever, starting nonprofits. I would see people my age doing that and go, well, crap. How is it that they're able to do this thing and I'm not able to do this thing, even though I've known that I wanted to be a writer since I was 8 years old? When I listed all the reasons why I couldn't be published or why I hadn't been published yet, I didn't focus on the right things. Instead of thinking, well, hey, I'm working on this huge, complex fantasy world that is going to take me years to build correctly, or the first book I want to publish is about an immortal character, so I need a bit more life experience before I go through that first. Side note, Keeper of the Dawn ended up being the first book I published. Moonshadow's Guardian is about an immortal character, and that's going to be coming out this November. And part of the reason that it is going to be my second book is that it does feature an immortal character who has already lived about 2,500 years, and that's a lot of memory and a lot of lived experience. And despite the fact that I lived a lot in my youth, I still didn't have the experience or the writing craft skills to make that perspective work until really recently. And it's only with the most recent round of edits I did that I actually finished about a week ago that I feel confident sending it to a professional editor and preparing to put it out into the world. Anyway, that was a long side note. Let's get back on track here, talking about comparisonitis. And instead of thinking about all those logical reasons why I hadn't got my book published yet, I would think things like, I'm just a terrible writer, or maybe even just a terrible person, and I don't deserve success. This obviously triggered a bout of depression, something that I have struggled with for most of my life, and could lead into days and days of me not writing because I didn't think I deserved writing success. Eventually, I realized that these comparisons were actually the thing holding me back and not my own internal capabilities, and I developed strategies to fight them. Today, I'm going to share 3 of those strategies with you so that you can beat these comparisons in your own life and start living a happier, more creative, and more successful life. Strategy number 1. Understand the difference between a good comparison and a bad comparison. Comparing ourselves to others is natural, and sometimes it can actually be useful. Comparisons can help us determine where we are in ratio to our goals, in ratio to our definition of success, and they can help us build a blueprint to work towards our ideal life. Unfortunately, as I already mentioned, they can also weigh us down, so you want to make sure that the comparisons you're making are actually useful and healthy. And you can do this by asking yourself a couple of quick questions. Is this comparison realistic? If you're dedicated to writing books, most of your free time is going to go to that. You shouldn't be comparing yourself to a professional athlete because they have to spend all day, every day, training to be a professional athlete. A small handful might also be able to write books on their rest days, but most people simply don't have it in them to do both, and it's unrealistic to expect yourself to be able to do both. If you have a full-time day job, you shouldn't be comparing your writing routine to Stephen King's because he's been writing full-time for decades. You also shouldn't be comparing your sales rankings to someone like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling because their sales are anomalies. These are not realistic goals to set for yourself. Many authors who are actively making a living from their books sell nowhere near as many copies as a J.K. Rowling or a Stephen King, and that's reality. You shouldn't be expecting yourself to reach these heights because only a tiny handful of people can, and as the market becomes flooded with more books and people have more opportunity to seek books from different sources, we're going to see a lot fewer. Well, not a lot fewer. There are only a few already. We're going to see even fewer big blockbuster book successes like Stephen King. Does this comparison motivate me to do better? Are you looking at someone else's life and going, wow, how can I make my life look like that? Or are you looking at their life and going, crap, I could never make my life look like that? If you answered yes to the first one, you're making a healthy comparison. If you answered yes to the second one, this is bad and you need to stop doing it. And the final question is, how much time are you spending on this comparison? Even the healthiest thing in the world, the healthiest habit in the world can be unhealthy if you do too much of it. And with comparing yourself to others, there's a very fine line. If you are spending more than a couple minutes a day comparing yourself to others, that's not healthy. If you're spending hours at a time going through someone else's life or multiple other people's lives or scrolling on Instagram and thinking about all the different ways that your life doesn't measure up to other people's, that is extremely unhealthy and it needs to stop right now. If while you are answering these questions you realize that all the comparisons you're making are healthy ones, congratulations! You don't need to watch the rest of this video, but don't forget to subscribe. For everyone else, let's move on to strategy number 2. And this one is all about talking to yourself, but not in the crazy way. You are going to repeat after me, I am unique. And every single time you start comparing yourself to others, you are going to think that same thought. You are going to think, I am unique. My journey is my own and only my own. I cannot expect to replicate anyone else's journey, nor can they expect to replicate mine. And you're going to have to do this, like with the guilt thing I mentioned in a previous video, you're going to have to do this every time these thoughts come up. You are going to have to actively challenge that and take a minute to go, why am I comparing myself to this person? I am unique. That's what makes me amazing. If you know this is something you're going to have trouble with, you can create scripts that you can use every single time a thought like this enters your head. I've actually got a couple scripts for this on my blog. You can check that out in the video description below. And you can create your own scripts. Those are just a jumping off point to show you what I'm talking about and how you can start implementing this in your own life. Alright, let's move on to strategy number 3. Eliminate news sources and social media channels that encourage comparisonitis. I'm pretty sure we all know that Instagram is the big target to point at here. There have actually been studies that have shown that Instagram can increase depression because everyone on Instagram only wants to show their best life, and so they're showing these amazing photos of their amazing meals and their vacations and all that great stuff. And if you don't have any of that great stuff, it's really easy to get depressed about it. So either carefully curate who you're following on Instagram or ditch it altogether. I personally hate Instagram, as I mentioned last week, so I just don't. And that's really much better for my mental health, but this can also happen on Twitter or Facebook to a lesser extent, so be really mindful of who you're following, where, and make sure that the people you're following are real people with real lives who do occasionally share that they also have struggles, so that it's not just a constant stream of apparent perfection being thrown in your face. The other thing, and this was the big one for me, is news sources. I used to be an inspiration junkie. I subscribed to sites like the Change blog and Upworthy, and I read every single article and I watched every single video, and I was sure it was going to inspire me to do my very best at everything and accomplish amazing things. And I did this because regular news sources are so crappy and just so full of misery and depression and awfulness. And I decided to cut those out completely and switch to inspiration. And I read every success story I could get my hands on. But in the end, it actually only made me more depressed. It only made me look at these people and go, why am I not able to do this? Why can't I do this? These sites showed these people at the end of their journey, and I was just looking at them at the end of their journey and going, why am I not there yet? Not trying to create my own journey or even really looking at their journey. Only looking at the end product, the thing they accomplished, and going, why haven't I done that? Or something similar. Eventually, I realized that these sites were serving as negative inspiration, so I cut most of them out of my life. So take some time today or this week to go through all your social media feeds and all of your newsletter subscriptions, and really for each one, ask yourself, is this giving me positive inspiration or negative inspiration? Is this leading me into the comparison trap? And if you're getting negative inspiration or you're falling into the comparison trap, ditch it. You do not need this stuff in your life. There is always something better to read, something better to watch, something that will light you up and actively inspire you. Alright, so those are my 3 main strategies for defeating comparisonitis. I hope they help you. If you have strategies that you've developed to defeat comparisonitis in your own life, please let me know about them in the comments section below. I have mostly dealt with this problem, but it is something I still struggle with from time to time, so every new strategy helps. And if you enjoyed this video, as always, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching. Now get back to writing.